What is up, my friends? So, yesterday I got the chance to go see a movie that I've been hyped for a pretty long time. Ever since I saw The Conjuring 2, I've been so hyped to see the character Valak be done in a spin-off. And I knew it was going to happen because Valak was given a lot of screen time in that movie. And just like Annabelle before it, I knew there was a spin-off coming and maybe possible sequels and whatnot. Now, before I get into The Nun, which is the movie I'm talking about if you're not aware right now, I want to talk a little bit about the Conjuring Universe and what I believe is next and just the impact it's had, honestly, on horror. Because, okay, up until this point, shared universes, I mean, Marvel was really the first one to ever really give an MCU like feel into like movies and whatnot. We've seen it in shows and stuff like that when other characters come from other shows, but we never seen a scale of world building such as what Marvel has done. And that's what we've seen with other superhero films. We've seen it with DC. We've seen it at... I think that nobody ever thought that they could build a world of horror universe shared type thing. And yeah, you got Freddy versus Jason, but that was more of a gimmicky crossover than anything. No, this is actual building stack type world building right here, where we have previous movies interlacing each other and just creating this big demonic entity of a force that is the Conjuring shared universe, as I like to call it now. And I'm excited to see where this goes next. I believe that we will definitely be seeing the Crooked Man coming up next and whatever else they might be up to. But I believe another Conjuring 3 is needed to wrap everything up perfectly. But I was excited for The Nun nonetheless. So let's just get into the movie itself. It's placed in 1952, so it's way back than any of the other Conjuring and Annabelle movies. Well, it's around the same like year as the second Annabelle Creation. And Annabelle Creation actually has two different timelines. It has the 40s and the 50s, but this one takes place in the 50s, The Nun, which was when Annabelle Creation's main storyline was as well. So in The Nun, we actually get to find out where exactly Valak came from, where it was, like why was he brought and stuff like that. So I'll get to that in a bit. But basically, the premise of the film starts with a nun committing suicide, and there's another nun as well there. They were trying to do something and lock up something or open something up with a key, but they had to go through this room where it was like buried, like I think the sign on it said, "This is where God ends." The first nun that went in there, however, she got killed by a force, and we can assume it was Valak. Then the second nun retrieved the key and she ran, and the only thing she could do was just hang herself because the nun, well, Valak was looking for a vessel, and if he were to get to her, then he would take her and roam the earth. So she just had to kill herself. That was the only way to stop anything. Next day, we see a guy named Frenchie. He actually comes around and sees the hanging nun, and then the church is informed about all of this, and then they send out a priest, and then they send out a nun as well. Well, she's still not a nun, but she's about to take her vows, so they both go to investigate in Romania to see what's going on at this place. And then when they get there, they meet Frenchie. Frenchie takes them, and he lets them know that he is not going to stay there because he's pretty spooked about everything that's going on. And so he leaves back. The main nun doesn't let them talk to the other nuns until the next day, so they have to stay the night. Then they have some things go wrong with Valak as he tries to terrorize them. So they get terrorized. The priest gets put in a coffin. The nun actually sees a apparition of sorts of Valak, and it just leads them to be even more terrorized. The next day, however, they actually get to go talk to the nuns. The priest stays behind, and then we find out that that place where they're at, another nun tells the main nun, Sister Irene, that that place was actually built in order for a duke in the Dark Ages to summon spirits, and not just spirits, but really like demonic stuff like demons and all of this, and create a gateway to hell basically. And the first demon that, or whatever he brought up, was Valak, but the church came just in time to be able to seal the gateway with the blood of Christ, and then they had to like pretty much bless the whole place and use nuns to be praying all the time, so they would create sort of a barrier of sorts for this gateway to hell. And then we actually get to the present day when there is World War II happening and some bombs shake up the place, and it creates the gateway to hell to break loose, which that doesn't kind of make sense to me, but okay, we'll keep on going for the movie's sake. Then we find out that the Sister Irene can't go out because the gates have already closed and they're not going to let her out till the next day, so she has to stay the night. And then stuff keeps on happening to them. The priest is on the other side of the castle. He can't get through because the gates have closed, and he's being haunted by this boy that he exorcised a long time ago, and the boy ultimately died, so he's still haunted by it, and I'm pretty sure Balak is using this against him. And then we see that Sister Irene has... So the priest is trying to get back to Sister Irene. As he's doing so, he starts being plagued by these sort of like zombie things, but luckily Frenchie comes to help him. They find Sister Irene, and now they're like, we have to find the blood of Christ again to seal it once and for all, and Balak can leave. They ultimately do find it with the key in the catacombs under the castle, but then Valak appears and she starts wreaking havoc on all of them, even possesses Sister Irene at a point. Frenchie comes in and helps her, however, and then we see that Frenchie gets attacked by Valak, and we see that he kind of dies, and then we see that Valak chases after Sister Irene as Sister Irene tries to get the blood of Christ, and he ultimately pretty much like starts choking her, and it's kind of like really, really dark stuff going on here. The priest tries to come and help, but then he gets knocked out by Valak. And then Valak, ultimately, it seems like he does kill Sister Irene. He pulls her up in a way of mocking her. She spits out the blood of Christ all over his face, and he ultimately starts like burning away, but Sister Irene is left to drown. And then we see that they ultimately do vanquish Valak, and he is gone for good again. Frenchie, the priest, and Sister Irene return back. Now, Father has lost his eye because of this. But what we see at the end is that Frenchie says that his real name is Maurice, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But ultimately, Frenchie does... We see that he has an upside down cross in the back of his neck, and that means that Valak ultimately did possess somebody and has a vessel now, and that is Maurice. And that's how the movie ends, and it ends with showing us that Maurice was actually, from The Conjuring, the first one, the guy they were talking about in the slideshows about a guy being possessed and doing an exorcism on him, and he was speaking Latin and all of this. And then that is where Vera Farmiga gets pretty much like a sort of like, I think that Valak doesn't take her as a vessel but attaches to her, and that's what we see happen with Vera Farmiga's character in The Conjuring and Conjuring 2, that she's being plagued by this dark entity, and it's because Maurice ties back in with the nun and The Conjuring as that person that they exorcised that ultimately shook Vera Farmiga and has her going through all of this in the Conjuring movies. So yeah, it was a pretty good tie-in, I think, for the Conjuring movies and the Nun and Valak and all of this. And we can pretty much assume now that this is not going to be the end of it. Supposedly there is a Nun 2 coming out if the Nun does well. And the Nun has been doing pretty well in pre-sales and whatnot. It's expected to make at least $40 million with a budget of $20 million. That's freaking good on the studio right there. I mean, as long as they make $100 million, it's fine. And this movie is for sure gonna make that, because I think the expectations are high for this movie. And let me just tell you, I had super high expectations for this movie. I was like, holy fuck, when I saw Animal Creation and there was a post-credit scene for the Nun, because I thought Valak is such a really interesting and terrifying character to bring to life, especially because it's the imagery of something you see as holy as a nun and whatnot, and then the way it's presented and what it is makes it really interesting. I think a lot of people would be excited to check this movie out, but I have to say, I think it's right there with the first Annabelle as the weakest in the entries. I think Annabelle is still the worst one, and this is the second worst, but it's just something about this movie felt really slapsticky about it, and there was more sort of like an Evil Dead-like feel to it. It's just my opinion, almost sort of Army of Darkness, if I will, that I didn't like about the movie. And there was just some times when jokes didn't land, and I was just like, holy fuck, did that really make it into the script? But nonetheless, I did enjoy it just because it adds more layers to the Conjuring universe, which I really, really love, and appreciate James Wan for going that extra mile with this and really redefining horror once again with this and showing that you can interlace many stories together. But would I actually go and pay to see The Nun? I would at a Redbox or a matinee or a dollar theater, but I don't think I would flesh out $10 for this movie, just because I think it was really weak in its scares. I think that there was nothing really that stood out, thinking about like, oh, I would just keep having nightmares about that over and over. I like to say, like, in the first Conjuring, we had the Bathsheba character when she was on top of that drawer. I thought that was really terrifying. And then in the Conjuring 2, I think the painting scene with the nun was really terrifying. But in this movie, honestly, there's nothing where I'm like, oh man, that scene really got to me and whatnot. I jumped because it was loud, but not because it was scary or scary imagery was around, because it wasn't. But nonetheless, that's just my opinion on The Nun. I'll be doing a video talking about the whole Conjuring universe tomorrow, so make sure you subscribe for that. Make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you like. We're on the road to 6,000 subscribers. I know we can hit that, but as always, that's going to do it for me. I'll see y'all next time. Stay positive, my friends.